Hi all, let's continue our look at the evolution of chess style and the Bronstein-Botvinnik match of 1951. So in this game David Bronstein was playing white. We have d4, e6, so Botvinnik is encouraging potentially an invitation for a French defence. This is declined with c4, f5, the Dutch defence, and Botvinnik chooses to go into a stone wall formation. So after knight c3, well, potentially it's a stone wall formation if black plays like this. Black castles e3, and we do have d5 here, and then c6. The slight downside structurally of this is the dark squares are being compromised. There's a bishop which might need to be activated later. Sometimes this kind of stuff, or playing on this diagonal or this diagonal. So the stone wall is a very, very interesting choice by Botvinnik. b3, knight e4, not minding the opening of the f file, but white ignores that, knowing that the knights are protecting each other at the moment. Knight d7, bishop b2. Now we have knight df6, queen d3, and now a very, very aggressive move by Mikhail Botvinnik. Indeed, very, very interesting idea behind it. g5. So how should one react to this? Well, David Bronstein plays c takes d5. And now, yeah, it's an interesting point here. If c takes d5, what's wrong with that? Well, it looks as though the c file might be dangerous. Let's absolutely check here. Yeah, maybe just f3 actually, or just prepare to use the c file. It's about equal actually. So we have e takes d5. And f3 here, knight takes, bishop takes, and the point is revealed, g4, to try and increase the clamp on the e4 square. So it's kind of positionally motivated, g5 for g4. We have f takes g4, and now this bind, this kind of bind on the e4 square is maintained with knight takes, keeping these two pawns binding, and it's as though white has played a kind of reverse French defense here. He's got a typical symptom of a French defense, this backward pawn on the semi-open file, and there's a bind on e4. How can white fight from this position? We have bishop h3, which portrays the idea that maybe taking at some point. The knight retreated here. Maybe this was a bit too hurried. It seems queen e8 might be plausible, if this is not too much to fear at the moment. Bishop takes, and say knight f4, bishop d6. This kind of position, where even this knight f6 could be used for a temporary pawn sack, or rather a pawn sack to gain control of the e4 square. This position should be about equal. Okay, but anyway, we have knight h6, knight f4. White has a seemingly pleasant position, but can he actually liberate out of this structure with this bind here on his e4 square? He plays for, it seems, a minority attack at least, or to undermine this pawn chain there. That is the exploitable point here. a6, a4 is a b5, queen e7 is played, and now if b5, let's see, there might be the possibility of c5. So b5 wasn't played here. Actually, c5 is no good. Knight takes d5, pardon me. So if we have a takes instead, this position, okay, maybe about equal, it seems. Okay, so we have rook a b1 preparing b5. b5 from black, quite committal and radical way of stopping b5 from white. Bishop g2, knight g4. Bishop d2, protecting the pawn. The knight coming back, that seems to be a very nice outpost square for black to celebrate. Rook b2, and now rook a1. So the rooks are shuffling to try and play for maybe a takes b5 in the near future. Rook f8, queen b3, as though a takes, and there's a problem with d5 in some lines. Just to show this, say a token move, just to show it, a takes, knight takes d5 is strong here, hitting the queen, and then we can take here and exploit the loose rook on a8. So Botvinnik gets out of the way. But now this, as though a takes again is renewed, and that threat of a takes is parried by protecting a8 in advance. So there's no problem with a8 here. But we have knight d3, and this is very interesting. Actually, the knight is fascinating to go into both squares. It seems as though the e5 square is controlled by black sufficiently. However, the e5 square in this position is connected with black's king. It is potentially this diagonal with the dark square bishop on the board. This could be, it seems very passive and blocked in, this bishop on e1 at the moment. But with knight e5, there could be a pawn sack at any point where it's dangerous. You know, you can imagine the bishop coming onto this diagonal, especially if this is snapped off as well. So bear this in mind. Rook a b8, a takes, and now rook a7, and black is under pressure here. And in fact, it's in this position white to play. What would you play in this position? And this shows really that in the Dutch stone wall, sometimes, even if you're apparently controlling the weak and dark squares, there's king safety connected with those weak and dark squares. Knight e5 is played, yes. Very, very dangerous move for black, trying to get this bishop onto this diagonal. Black just played bishop e8. Now let's say Botvinnik took here, d takes, rook takes, this aforementioned idea, bishop takes e4, with the idea of bishop c3 is quite crushing. You know, if f takes, we just play bishop c3, end of game basically. If king g8, yeah, we don't have to take the bishop yet. We can just play this, and it's the king which is getting slaughtered. So very, very powerful move, and black is in real trouble now. And now white, after this move, he's still holding this rook. I know that's been attacked, but he plays now. What does white play in this position? If I give you 5 seconds starting from now. So it seems black is never going to give this diagonal. Are there any other key dark square diagonals which could be handy here? How can white get into them? How can white feed this bishop a career path basically on e1? White to play. 5 seconds to pause the video. Liberate the bishop. g4. And also this f file could be handy later as well. Potentially. F takes is played. Perhaps this is a mistake. Best maybe rook c8. And if queen d1, queen h6, maybe black can hold things and just ignore this threat on this pawn here. If white ever takes, well, e3 is under fire, so queen e2, say here, you might think, well, what about the f5 pawn? Let's just check this position out for a moment. It is actually better for white. White can still play stuff like this and this. It is actually better for white. So anyway, maybe, so black is under pressure. He did take on g4. And now we have bishop takes e4. And now this bishop really comes to life with the move bishop h4 with tempo, key tempo. And black now doesn't want to put up with that knight anymore in this position. Let's see what's going on here. Black played rook takes e5, funny enough. Why there? Why not other moves? If rook takes, what is white actually threatening? Well, queen e6 for bishop f6. And if queen h6, bishop g3, and it's pretty nasty here. There's threats of d5 and queen c3 to get onto this diagonal once e5 is held. For example, like this, d5, and then queen b2, and this diagonal is just lethal. So that could happen after rook takes a7 here. And you might think, well, okay, what about rook g7? Again, queen e6, this infiltration is very dangerous. What does black do? If he takes here, takes, we're going to play bishop f6. Or even rook f1 first. So black is in trouble. He played rook takes e5. After d takes, bishop takes. It's one pawn for the exchange, but look at the f file now. Rook f1. Yeah, this is really bad. And also note, there's no tactic on f1. If takes, this can be just taken because this diagonal is lethal with queen in this position, queen c3 or queen b2 will mate on g7, for example. So yeah, there's no bishop takes h2. We have queen g8, which looks at the queen, and now white's play here, brilliant move, one of the best. White's play, can you guess if I give you 5 seconds starting from now? Okay, bishop g3. Yeah, the bishop just wants to get on this diagonal and mate the king, basically. So queen takes b3 is not played. Bishop g7 is played. You might think, what happens after queen takes b3? Well, the quickest way is actually the check here, forcing the queen back, and then just bishop takes e5 is checkmate. Yeah, so we have bishop g7, but now there's a rook hanging here, so white just takes on g8. That's sufficient to win here, and just take the rook after. Quite a crushing game here in the Dutch stone wall, and shows that even though the dark squares seem controlled, if they're connected to black's king, they may be subject to a pawn sack, and especially this seemingly bad bishop, the dark square bishop of white, had potential for liberation not just across this diagonal but this diagonal as well. So it's interesting, this game, how this seemingly passive piece was liberated with great effect. Very instructive game there from David Bronstein, and cast some doubts on the well, the double-edgedness of the Dutch stone wall is emphasised. I hope you enjoyed it. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.